I already know all this stuff. That at least there was a book that was a little more joyful. It wasn't using all this like world-conquering war, businesses, war, and it's a fight to the death kind of language that I was seeing in a lot of business books, because so few business books on systems are written by women.
In this episode, you'll get to know Jenny Blake, the joyful systemizer, and you'll hear the story of how she used her gift for spotting patterns and simplifying things to becoming a world-renowned expert in career development. I'm Dave Crenshaw, and this is My Success Project. Welcome, friends, to the Dave Crenshaw Success Project. This is the show where I'm teaching my children how to be successful through the life stories of others, but you get to come along for the ride. And in case it's your first time here, my name's Dave Crenshaw. I'm a best-selling author. I speak around the world to Fortune 500 companies, and I've taught millions of people how to be successful through my online courses. I'm also a husband and a father of 3, and my family means the world to me. So when I thought about creating a podcast, what inspired me was the idea of creating something lasting that I could pass on to them to help them succeed. But don't be fooled, this show is for adults too, because I thought you'd enjoy learning along with my family. In my interviews, I speak to some of the most successful people I've met in my life's journey, and today's guest is a perfect example of that. Now, some of the guests you might have heard of in the news or social media. Others have flown under the radar, so to speak, but they still have great stories. And I also try my best to interview people who have balanced success, and they have happiness in their own unique way. Because as a leadership expert and a coach, I've found that success isn't one size fits all. There are infinite numbers of ways that you and I and my kids can become successful. And when I talk about balanced success, I mean that they have success in multiple areas of their lives, not just financial or in their career. In fact, I believe there are 6 facets of success. Think about where you're doing in each of these 6 areas: relationships, health, your profession or career, money, a cause, as in a charitable cause, and fun. And so when I interview people like today's guest, I'm trying to find someone who has a nice mix of all of these, because multifaceted success shines like a diamond. And that's the kind of success I want to help my family and help you find. That's what this success project is all about. And boy, is today's guest a great way to learn about having multifaceted success. Now, before I introduce her, I want to ask you to do one thing. And it's not like or subscribe to this, although if you do that, that would be great. I'm not going to complain. But really, what I want you to do is do something for yourself as you're listening to this interview. Look for one action. Look for one thing you can do as a result of what you hear, and then do it. And in that way, you'll make Jenny Blake a part of your life forever. And that's who my guest today is. Jenny Blake is an award-winning author and a podcaster who runs a media and licensing company. She loves helping entrepreneurs and organizations move from friction to flow through smarter systems powered by delightfully tiny teams. I love that phrase she used, delightfully tiny teams. She also co-created Google's acclaimed Career Guru coaching program. Her 2 podcast shows have over 1.5 million downloads combined, and you need to subscribe to those after you listen to this. Free Time with Jenny Blake for heart-based business owners, and Pivot with Jenny Blake for navigating change. Her award-winning 3rd book, Free Time, Lose the Busy Work, Love Your Business, just came out, and she's also the author of Pivot, The Only Move That Matters Is Your Next One. And that won the Axiom Award for Best Business Book in the Careers category. Jenny, how are you doing?
I am delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, the moment I thought about creating this show and this podcast and the whole spirit of it, of helping my kids learn and helping others learn how to be successful, I'm like, I've got to get Jenny Blake on here, because your energy and your enthusiasm and your positivity is just so infectious. I had to have you.
Oh, well, thank you. I felt the same way about you ever since we met at one of Dory's dinners. And I felt like you
Yeah,
just
yes.
breezed into New York City. And I was like, who is this guy? And we filmed that little micro video right there outside of the restaurant. And I just was really amazed and have been awed by you too. And our interview, having you on the Free Time podcast, has just stuck with me ever since, about continually looking for my most valuable activities. And so you've really taught me a lot over the years too.
Yeah, I'm grateful that the Dory connected us. And for those who don't know the whole story, we've been part of kind of a mastermind over the last couple of years where we haven't even met in person. It's all been virtual, but we've gotten to know each other and our businesses quite well because of it. So
Sure.
I'm going to start with a question I like to ask everyone because it's just a fun question and it kind of starts us at the beginning of your story. Jenny, what did you want to be when you grew up? And I'm not talking about when you were in grade school. Everybody says, like astronaut and president for that, right? I'm talking about when you were in high school, you're a teenager, you started forming opinions about what you wanted your career to be. What were you imagining would occur?
I did always have being a writer in mind. Specifically, I thought I was going to be a journalist. So for much of my definitely childhood, I was always playing business. Like my make-believe game of choice involved business and filling out forms. Like I would steal carbon copy paper from the ski resort and like make my family members fill out these forms. So I was definitely setting myself up for office life. And I even used to prop up a video camera and then pretend to give news broadcasts when I was a kid. So that communication thread was always there. But as I got involved with writing for the college newspaper at UCLA, I realized that everybody who was pursuing journalism seemed extremely stressed out, short on time, and underpaid. And they were not doing well in school. So that's when I pivoted.
Oh, that's great. Well, so first of all, you were already putting your feet on the path of where you ended up. And I completely agree with what you found out about journalism. It's something that I've had to adjust in my life because chasing that news cycle is just so stressful. So where did that come from? I mean, man, that's really specific. Just pretending to play business and making your family fill out the forms. Where did that inspiration come from?
Well, I can try to guess. I mean, for starters, when I was born and my mom said my name, Jennifer Blake, my grandma said, "Oh, Jennifer Blake, that sounds like an author's name or a writer's name." So in a way, she even put that thought into the universe. I also used to play school. I used to make my brother fill out worksheets that I would create. And I wanted him to, he was younger than me. I wanted to teach him what I was learning so he could get ahead in school, like so he could learn and he could have shortcuts. And that's very interesting because I still do that today where I create tools and templates and I try to, whatever problems I solve or whatever stressors I struggle with, I love creating systems and streamlining and then sharing that out with people. So I think the impulse, when you ask where does it come from, I have this real innate desire to be helpful. And that might come because I am an older sister. It might come because my parents worked full time and my brother and I were often buddies. I was kind of a latchkey kid. I was on my own a lot after school. And I just always felt like if I could be helpful to the people around me, that would be a good thing.
That's amazing. And really, you have built a whole career around helping people. I know, for instance, your free time program right now, you're giving processes and systems and procedures to business owners. You're still doing what you started wanting to do inherently. And I think that's why we get along so well, too, is because systems, I mean, you're speaking my language, right? And for those who are unfamiliar, we're talking not just about like software or something like that, which of course can be helpful, but we're talking about processes, right? Trying to do something, documenting how you're doing something, and then making adjustments to it.
I also feel something I really respect about how you run your business and your body of work is acknowledging the entire person that we are. It's not just about the work and how much quantity we can churn out by working 24/7. You and I both share this value of optimizing our life and being full people and being family members and having a partner. And you have kids. I have a dog, my fur baby, German Shepherd. And just the whole point of smarter systems is not just for the sake of it. And it's definitely not for the sake of just increased productivity on the same old hamster wheel. I think you and I both agree that we want to make room to live our lives and be present and be able to problem solve when personal things come up. And so That's what's fun about systems and process design is that there are very real results that you get that precious time back to do what's most meaningful.
Right. And that's also part of the reason why I wanted to interview you. And honestly, it's a goal for every guest that I bring on this show is that it's not just about financial or career success. It's about multifaceted success with your health and with your relationships and with having a cause that you support. All of those things are important because just having financial success is enough, right? Mm-hmm. All those other things we want to experience. We want to have joy in our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And do more and more of our best work. Maybe for me as a kid, I mean, my dad became self-employed when I want to say I was in middle school, but I also saw that if my parents both worked full time, that meant that I didn't really see them. They're out of the house 7 or 8 a.m. and they got divorced when I was young, but one parent or the other, became so limited when I could actually see them. And it just kind of struck me. I think it sparked something in me that there's got to be a better way than this factory system work schedule where everybody's racing around. And I just do not think that this 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, I don't think that schedule leads to human thriving. It might lead to a productive enterprise that benefits the very top of the chain of a corporation, but I definitely don't think that schedule is set up to help us be our best, happiest, healthiest, most present selves.
Let's take a quick break. No matter what your career is, your foundation of success begins with one thing: effective time management. And thanks to the generosity of Microsoft, you can get my entire course, Time Management Fundamentals, for free on LinkedIn Learning. Go to davegift.com to get your free access now. This is the course that millions around the world have used to become more productive and reduce stress. Everyone from Fortune 500 executives to freelancers to students. Now, it's the same coaching I've provided in person for tens of thousands of dollars per day, but you can get it for free on LinkedIn Learning. You don't need to provide anything to access it. No credit card, no email. Just go to davegift.com and start learning. Thank you so much, Microsoft and LinkedIn Learning, for your partnership. davegift.com. Yes, I wholeheartedly agree. It's about determining the kind of life that you want to lead and then building your career around that. So let's jump back in your story for just a little bit. You go into college. Were you studying journalism in college?
Yes, I had actually won this award for California High School Journalist of the Year, and I made it to the top 4 in the country in this National Journalists Association. And then I proceeded to get rejected from every journalism school I applied to, all these East Coast universities. Definitely got rejected from Columbia and Tufts and even the Northwestern School of Journalism. So that was my first little wake-up call that even winning this prestigious award and being supposedly top 4 in the country didn't get me into those schools that I thought might be a shoo-in. And that was the first thing that kind of alerted me, hey, this may not be what you're meant to do. So I did get a little communication scholarship that I took with me into UCLA, but pretty quickly, I was also going to finish school really early. So in addition to my communications major, I added political science. And I really was enjoying political science. So my other parallel career that I had my eye on was working for a presidential campaign someday.
Interesting. You said that you were going to graduate early. Is that because you were working ahead in high school, that you had lots of college credits?
I was a little bit working ahead. And then, you know me, Dave, I created a spreadsheet that mapped out all 4 years of college. I mapped my major. Okay. I knew exactly what classes to take. And I put it in a sheet protector. And I did not veer from the path. And when I mapped out the major, yes, with college credit, I think I did summer school. I mean, I really loved learning, but I also loved planning my schedule so I could be super efficient with what classes I took. And it was going to get me to be done in like a year and a half, something wild.
I want to pause there for a second because you were thinking about it in terms of journalism, political science, and stuff like that. But really what you were creating was this career about, as you mentioned before, helping others and creating systems. Like what I'm saying is it wasn't necessarily the end goal of journalism that's really who Jenny Blake is and became. It's really that process of planning and scheduling things out, right?
I would say both. What I enjoyed about
Okay.
journalism, which has a lot in common with podcasting that I do to this day, writing, of course, and when I was doing one-on-one coaching, what I love about journalism is that you get to explore so many different things. And the key skill is curiosity and communicating clearly. And so there was this New Yorker cartoon that a journalist had a dart and they got to throw the dart and it was said, what do I want to become an expert in today? And then they throw the dart at the dartboard and there's 100 topics. So that was really fun. And what I didn't love as a news reporter was my editor was encouraging me to like dig and get a gotcha story, and people started hanging up the phone on me. And I didn't like that feeling, but I did love the feeling about being able to quickly understand something, ask interesting questions, and then communicate it back out. Coaching is the exact same thing. Podcasting, same thing. Get to connect with fascinating people, just like we're doing right now. Have a deep, rich, intimate conversation, but do it on the record so that that conversation doesn't just stay in the coffee shop. It creates an asset. It creates a resource. It creates a standalone learning module, to use a really technical industry jargon term,
Sure.
that people can discover even years into the future.
I think that's fascinating that that's where you developed your coaching chops, was in journalism. That's not a path that I have heard before, but it completely makes sense.
And coaching's fun because it's all about like going on a treasure hunt. So whether it's for a news article or with a coaching client or a podcast interview, there's this intuitive wayfinding about what's the story here? What's at the heart of this? And you're doing it right now exceptionally well. I'm loving your questions, which is like,
Thank you.
Follow your intuition and follow the threads, ask enough questions. And that's what coaching is about too. And coaching blends my love of reading and learning, and of course teaching, but also with this idea of excavating what is in a person's heart. What is their soul calling them to do? And how can I facilitate their best thinking to help them thrive in ways that they might not be able to see for themselves?
Yeah. And that's, again, one of the things that I admire about you is everything that you do, even when it's about business and success and productivity and career, it always comes back to this optimism and belief that if a person connects with what's in their heart, they're going to be their best selves and they're going to do their best work.
I know it can be scary, especially when you're the one feeling uncertain. I'm sure you've had those moments too. And I wonder if you have, Dave, where you're right in the middle of a transition and feeling stuck. It is so easy to just think there's something wrong with me. Why can't I just be happy? What's wrong with me? Just suck it up. All that language. Ultimately, it's not that helpful. And I don't think we're doing anyone any good if we just accept that. And so every time I have had the courage to take steps in a new direction, it's always paid off, even if not right away, even if I had to adjust mid-course. How about you? Do you still grapple with that of like, what's wrong with me? Or did you overcome that long ago?
Yeah, I think I've certainly had that, and I felt that in the past. Honestly, and I'm guessing this is probably something that you teach in all of your work. For me, it's always just what's next. I guess it can be considered a weakness, but to a degree, I just leave the past behind me and just go on to the next thing, with just believing that it was useful, but I don't need to keep thinking about it. It's already in my DNA. It's already part of what I do. So let's move on. I don't know if that's how you look at it or if you take a different approach.
I love that. And it's also fun that certain things you think you're moving on from may show up later. And then you're the perfect person for some future opportunity, or your past experiences coalesce to become this really unique advantage for a new field or a new project.
So you were doing journalism, and then one of the first things that led to your success was that you were a career coach at Google and created a program for them. So how did you get to there from where you were in college?
Well, a friend and I asked one of my political science professors if we could be her research assistant. Her name is Lynn Vavrick, and I just saw her on the Ezra Klein show. So that was really cool because
that's great.
Seeing her name get out there. And So we were her research assistant. We loved her. We would sit in the front row of her class. She was such a great teacher and a great researcher. And I stuck with that. And then a job opportunity opened up, which at the time was my hometown. I grew up in San Francisco and Palo Alto. And she said, "Do you want to come work for this company?" I thought I would be an intern, and so did she, because I was still in college filing papers. But pretty quickly, the founder realized I was capable of doing a lot more, probably because of all my side projects and love of playing Office. So they quickly offered me a job, and I took a leave of absence from UCLA, took some summer classes at Stanford to keep on track for my degrees, and then went back to finish school while working remotely and graduate with my class. So by the time I graduated, I already had a job at this startup company. It had grown from one employee, me, to 30. And eventually I hit a plateau about 2 years in. And that's when I started interviewing at Google.
How did you know it was a plateau? How did you recognize that?
I was just feeling bored by the work. I don't love that phrase, but I think that's what happens to a lot of people that I call high net growth. That's what I call them in Pivot. And if you're high net growth, boredom is really uncomfortable. And I didn't quite know how to have that conversation with my boss. Because it was a startup, the org chart was a little wonky. I actually had 3 managers. So part of me felt like I was kind of being micromanaged, and there wasn't really room for me to grow. I don't think they were ready to give me any sort of promotion. So my plateau was just boredom and not really seeing a way out.
Well, and that's interesting because I know that at your core, you're very entrepreneurial. And one pattern that I see with successful entrepreneurs is that boredom happens and they transition to something new because of it. But sometimes you can just innovate within, I think this is what you were hinting on, you can just innovate within the space where you already are to fight that boredom. But at that point, and obviously it turned out to be something good, but at that point you interpreted it as, I need something new. I got to try something else.
Yeah. And I'm a great builder. I love taking things from 0 to 1, to use a Peter Thiel book title parlance.
Okay.
So I built our employee handbook, 0 to 1. I helped set up the entire office, all the furnishings, the process. Like, my pride and joy was if someone came to tell me we needed toilet paper, I would say it's already on the way. We didn't have Amazon next day delivery then. And I loved anticipating everybody's needs. But by the time my role became more about maintaining, I taught myself web design, HTML, CSS, and I studied with the consultant we hired so I could learn how to build websites. And I would read CSS books on the elliptical machine at the gym. Like, I was just eating up knowledge. But by the time it came to maintain our AdWords accounts, maintain the websites, maintain the office, that's for me where the boredom kicks in. And that was true even at Google. I would create and launch these big global programs, but when it came time to maintain and market them, I do not thrive. I'm not very good at it. And of course, as entrepreneurs, yes, we have to still stick with things we don't like. But that's why I always am trying to find creative ways to go about anything that involves maintenance or marketing.
You bring up something which, again, is very entrepreneurial, which is your strength is in starting. And I want to highlight that for a second because I felt this, and I know other people feel it who are entrepreneurial. You feel guilty, right? There's some guilt of, I just start things, but I don't finish them. And what's wrong with me? When in reality, what you want to ask is, how do I marry this strength with somebody else's strength, which is finishing? And they do exist. There are people who want to attach themselves to an entrepreneurial vision and be the one who maintains and keeps it going. I use an analogy, and you can tell me what you think about this. I use it the kite and the string. And the kite wants to fly high, right? It wants to go up in the air, but you need to be grounded. You've got to have someone who's keeping you to the ground and maintaining what you're learning. Is that still a principle that you follow? Do you still view yourself as a starter, or have you learned to be more of a finisher, or are you using someone else to be that finisher for you?
I guess I don't see it as starting and finishing, because I finish what I start for sure. Like when I set out to write a book, I will finish it. It will come out. The first 2 books took 2.5 years. The third one took only 1 year because I had a process down and I kind of was less afraid. I had fewer gremlins. And so is
it maintaining rather than finishing?
Yes, I think within the business sense. So I guess what I wanted to say about finishing is that I think it is really important to finish meaningful projects. You don't have to finish everything you ever start in your life, but what I see holds a lot of people back from finishing, like actually getting a project over the finish line, is perfectionism. So
yes,
that's where you got to say, this is not going to be perfect and I'm going to launch it anyway. So for example, I created this global drop-in coaching program that you mentioned at Google. It was very important to me to not only build that, but finish building it and then launch it. Once it's launched and out into the world, that's handing the string over to someone else. It's almost like I built the kite. I visualized what the kite might need to look like. Then I wove the string, and then now I'm going to hand this over. And so the maintaining, sometimes in a business sense, maintaining is also about scaling. And
yes.
One thing I've given myself permission to do in my business is to stay small. That it's okay if I don't want to scale to create a 20-person consulting shop. I might take fewer clients at higher rates just so I don't have to manage a big team. Whereas other people might say, no, I got to get my ideas out there and spread them as far and wide as I can. And I will build whatever size team is necessary to do that in service of the ideas. And I'm much more of a hybrid because I want it to be in service of me personally. Which is maybe where a little bit of selfishness comes in as opposed to pure dedication to scaling the idea itself.
Well, you're using yourself, a principle that you teach, which is about delightfully tiny teams, which I love that phrase. It's such a great visual.
Thank
right?
you.
I have a delightfully tiny team in my business.
Totally. And it's like delightfully tiny because for some of us, I don't know, I don't love managing people. I'm okay at it. But delightfully tiny is that you're small enough to work in a really agile way and everybody has good working relationships. And so you're not working alone because that's not delightful. That's bottlenecked. But it's also not so big that creates all this extra complexity and bureaucracy.
Right. And again, some people are fantastic with that and
Yes.
can manage it and do really well. But I think you and I are of like minds in that we say, you know what, even if we could do it well, we don't want to, right?
Right.
We'd rather
Right.
just focus on content and helping people and let other people who are more patient with that deal with the logistics and the details.
Yes.
Okay, I want to take a big picture here. And I've noticed a pattern, and I don't know if you've noticed this pattern. So you've written 3 books, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and there was one in 2011,
Mm-hmm.
and then there was one in 2016, and then one in 2022. So we're basically looking at about a 5-year cycle between books. Can you take me through the big picture of why did you choose each of these books at each time? And the reason why I'm asking this is because I know from experience that books have come out of me because of what I'm working on myself or my clients at the time. So I'm guessing there were moments, things that you were dealing with each of these books.
Definitely. Yeah. Life After College, my first book, that sprang from a blog. I started a website in 2005 called lifeaftercollege.org. And that was to be in service of other 20-somethings. We didn't have the phrase adulting at that time, but I felt very alone because I had taken a leave of absence from college. So I wasn't with my cohort figuring out adulting, how to have a job, what to wear to work, what to do with my money, how to have health insurance, what to do with any of it. I was just completely lost. And social media was not around, certainly not in the same way. Even Google is very nascent. So as I was reading all these books about personal development and personal finance, health and fitness, professionalism, I started collecting the best tidbits. And that's what I was putting into the website that became a blog. It turned into a blog in 2007. And then I ended up getting the book deal in 2010. By the time Life After College was coming out as a book in 2011, I felt pretty complete about it. I was then 27. I'm like, okay, I'm good here. I don't want to keep talking about life after college for the next 30 years, even though maybe Richard Bowles, who wrote What Color Is Your Parachute, that's his one main flagship book that he'll sell for 50 years. I didn't see myself that way. I was like, I'm good here. I'm complete. I've created the portable life coach for 20-somethings in that first book, and I was ready to move on. And that's when I hit the wall of what's next, that question you said earlier. And over and over, I was having these micro existential crises way more often than the media which the media would just say, oh, you'll have a midlife crisis and then you'll have a quarter life crisis. I think that term quarter life crisis was even invented in like 2007. And so I was wondering, well, then what's wrong with me? Because why am I having this existential crisis every 2 years? That's eventually what sparked that search, and then reverse engineering a process to map what's next is what became Pivot, the next book.
So interesting. So it was, you're solving a problem for yourself. Then you feel like, I've got a pretty good solution. Let's share it with everybody. Book. And then you did that again with Pivot.
Yeah. It's also, why do I need to read 100 books to figure out what's next? And I genuinely mean that. I typically read at least a book a week, sometimes two. And it goes in waves. Lately, I haven't been reading anything at all, but I could not understand why I needed to read 50, 100 books just to get my head screwed on straight. That was the case with Life After College, and it was definitely the case with Pivot. So the other impulse is, I can clearly see that this doesn't exist because I have read everything I could get my hands on, and no one thing worked. So then my impulse is, well, let me save other people all that time of having to read all these books, do all this searching, all the existential spinning. How can I synthesize everything I've absorbed now, bookworm that I am, and then give them the one thing, like, here's this, and with free time, the latest, you're right. Like, it is often solving my own problem, but free time was one where I just hadn't given myself permission to write a book for business owners because I never felt fully qualified. So even though it's what I love to do, I was coaching and teaching people behind the scenes, behind a paywall in my private community. I really never thought that I was quite cut out to write a business book because I was not making gazillions of dollars. I hadn't sold a company. I didn't even like building a big company. So that one was a slightly different exercise of bringing it to fruition because I was more holding myself back, which I did in different ways with the first two books as well.
So what I'm loving about this conversation, Jenny, is I'm recognizing that there are similarities that you and I have that I did not recognize. Clearly, there are differences, right? But one thing that I'm noticing is that desire to simplify things.
Yes.
Right? You're taking these complex issues and you're reading a lot more books than I read. You've got to be one of the most voracious consumers of knowledge that I know. But it's always with the intent of, how do I simplify this? How do I make this accessible to someone? And how do I make it, to a degree, a little bit better than what I learned?
Yeah, for sure. And also, one thing I found specifically with business books is that a lot of them are so boring. They're so boring.
Yes.
And I felt like what did not exist was, not only did I want a book for myself as the business owner and permission to run and build a business differently than what I was seeing out there, I also wanted a book that I could hand to my team and that I envisioned other business owners handing to their team members, saying, here, read this. This is how we work. And this book almost serving in a meta sense as the training and onboarding manual for employees around the world, or part-time contractors, VAs, EAs, where I would actually relieve pressure off the owner and free the owner's time just by having written this book. So that even if the owner knew everything in it and they go, this is so basic, I've read E-Myth, I've read 4-Hour Workweek, I already know all this stuff, that at least there was a book they could give to their new team members that was a little more joyful. It wasn't using all this like world conquering war, businesses, war, and it's a fight to the death kind of language that I was seeing in a lot of business books, because so few business books on systems are written by women. It'd be hard to name even one.
Well, and I think that choice that you made for free time in particular is what makes it stronger and more unique, is because it's speaking to a very specific type of person. And I don't think that's just women. I think it's anyone who's like,
yes,
I need more heart in my business. I need to feel more connected instead of just, I'm playing a numbers game, right? There's another one of those phrases. I'm just trying to churn through as much money as I can. And instead you're saying, what kind of life do you want? And is your business giving you that? And are you feeling connected to the work that you're doing every day? I think that's beautiful.
Thank you. Thanks for saying that. Yeah, free time. If Pivot is for people who are high net growth, free time is for people who are high net freedom. So the way I talk about them now, it's like a sandwich. Pivot is about mapping what's next, and free time is about optimizing what's now. Because once you've pivoted and you're happy with your overall work and business container, now we can zoom in and focus on, okay, how do we make the most of what's here now once you're happy post pivot, even though the secret is that we're always in a state of pivot, basically.
Yeah. Well, that's true. We're always changing. So I'm going to ask you a partially selfish question. It's just something that I've dealt with. I haven't quite dealt with the existential crisis that you're talking about in terms of each change, but there is a concern with each pivot as an entrepreneur that I'm leaving my best customers behind, right? Because life after college, that's targeting people who have graduated from college. Pivot, that kind of sounds the same, but I'm guessing the way that it's written, it's geared more toward anyone in like a middle manager career position. Free time is very much targeted toward small business owners. So each time you made that change, you're kind of moving away from an audience that you used to talk to. Is that a concern to you at all? How do you reconcile that in your mind?
Definitely. With life after college to pivot, I had less of that concern because I knew that my audience was growing up with me, essentially. So I was not afraid to leave them behind because I knew that they would face their own post-graduation pivots and be asking what's next. And you're right. Pivot, I wrote for people of all ages, all stages, all bank account balance. It was more of a psychographic, going to that high net growth person who was going to be bored easily, but really craving learning, meaning, and making an impact. So I was less afraid. I felt good about life after college. I wasn't leaving anyone behind. It's just, here's this resource for the next cohort who graduates. But as far as the audience that was sticking with me, I knew they could benefit from pivot. Free time, though, was a bigger risk. And I was very clear, and I have been very clear, that not all pivoters are going to want to run their own business. And so that was really scary. Right. And just even to give you a weirdly specific statistic of the Pivot List newsletter, I think has 15,000 subscribers. Who knows how many actually open and read? But the free time list currently has 2,000. Partly because it's much newer, but it's also more specific. Now, part of me will say, well, there's 25 million small businesses in the US alone that are non-employer businesses. They have no full-time employees. So I still feel like, okay, of those 25 million, how many are going to resonate with heart-based business values and the way I'm talking about doing business? I know there's more opportunity. But that's partly why I have kept both platforms active, because Pivot is still running strong. And I just want it to be an and. So I'm not leaving them behind. I'm just also talking much more specifically over here. Some people have said this is like trying to chase two rabbits. You're going to lose them both. And I think of it that I'm on two skis, and skiing can be really fun, but sometimes your skis get crossed and they go haywire and you're like ending up crumpling in a ball falling down the slope, you know?
You're speaking from experience, aren't you?
Yeah, I have. I do. I'm thinking of those Black Diamond with all the moguls. I don't know if I'll maintain both, but for now it feels good. And it feels, to our point about maintaining, I don't want to shut down Pivot just because I also want to talk about this other thing over here. I'm going to see if these two big ideas can coexist in my ecosystem and just give that a chance. Because it was nerve-wracking, and it was very nerve-wracking to think about writing free time, that because the voice I used was to small business owners, I still have a question mark if bigger companies will want to hire me. And that's who pays a lot of my bills when speaking is more active, when we're not in a pandemic. So I just gave a talk for free time at Google, and it super resonated. It started going viral. They're sharing it left and right. And that gave me a huge sense of relief that a company was willing to bring me in and that people really loved the content, even though the book wasn't written directly to them.
Yeah, that's fascinating because that's not the target audience, employees at Google. Right. And yet you found a way and they found a way to make it fit for them. So I think that's beautiful. You're really getting to the core of the argument of specificity versus general, or focused versus broad. And I'll love to see the evolution of that for you. The one question that I wonder if you've already addressed is, can they coexist, or can something like Pivot continue without you personally being heavily involved? Is there a way that you don't have to think about it as much, you still own it, but it doesn't require your attention. So you feel like you're crossing skis.
I did do a podcast episode on why I stopped exploring the pivot side of the business. And I talk about a lot of those options that I had thought. I went through a whole process of I could bring in a CEO, I could sell the business, I could just bring in a podcast co-host. There were all kinds of options. Ultimately, one thing I realized is that I've basically created a new job for myself as a full-time podcaster, and I love it so much. And I'm connecting with super interesting people. I do 4 episodes a month for Pivot, and then I do 8 a month for Free Time. And so I'm actually pretty happy. Like once I've honed my role to do my MVAs, my most valuable activities that I learned from Dave Crenshaw, then I'm kind of okay doing both. I think where it would become awkward is if one of them really hit the big time and I was suddenly turning down a ton of work. But even then, I don't know if I would care. And I just want to say one thing to your point about specificity. It has been much easier creating content for Free Time than it has for Pivot. Because Pivot is so broad, it's anybody navigating change, which in a sense is all of us, especially the last few years. But Free Time, it's for small business owners. I know exactly what the issues are. I know exactly what I'm struggling with. I know exactly what tools to recommend. And I don't have to couch and caveat everything. Well, if you're early in your career, then this. Well, if you're a people manager, then that. Well, if you're navigating a post-retirement pivot, then this. Like it was always so much harder to know what to say on a podcast, a solo episode, for example, for Pivot, than I'm figuring out for Free Time. So I can definitely just want to emphasize what you said, that being more specific is actually incredibly helpful for the creative process.
Well, and I think as I'm hearing you talk about this, it's just clear that that's where your heart is right now. And you're having more fun and you're having more joy because of that. And I would say that the success that you've had in the past with Life After College, with Pivot, with all the work that you've done with Fortune 500 companies, that has given you the freedom to do something that you want, even if it's not driven by money or numbers.
I think also sometimes it takes the money and the numbers time to catch up. So even with Pivot, it wasn't obvious that was going to produce anything. And for a few years there, I was running really lean, didn't know if I could pay my rent, was just kind of putting faith that if I invest in this new idea and this new direction, good things can come. And they did. And so it's almost like each book is its own mini startup, because now I'm just at that point again. So I fully believe and want to create a very abundant path via Free Time as well. But it's almost like the younger sibling. It's just younger than Pivot and Life After College. So it hasn't had as much time for the serendipity popcorn to pop, like for those ideas to spread.
And do you think in 5 years, it'll be time for the next startup via book?
I don't know. I know so many people have said this, but it's like, oh my gosh, it's so much work that I still have the don't even look at me new idea. And I also have to, as you said, I'm attracted to creating new. I have told myself no new projects. I'm on detention. I'm on hiatus. Like I am not allowed to create a new thing, because until I fully launch everything I already have, and I've launched each thing in their own small ways, but I mean, I'm just not allowed to create something new. I have plenty in my business between Pivot, between Free Time, the 2 big umbrellas. They all have an ecosystem of products and services and subcontractors and sub teams. And there's plenty of options for everybody on both sides. So I am fully on detention from being able to create anything new in the next year. And if I do, get me in trouble.
Do I have permission to say, now, Jenny?
Yes.
You know, you made a promise to yourself.
Yes. And the thing is, it's the first time I feel so connected, as you said, like not just to the ideas, but to podcasting in general. It's this wild thing. It almost takes us full circle back to talking about journalism, because it's very hard to earn a robust living from podcasting, and it's extraordinarily time intensive. But I love it so much that I'm trying to kind of stay put and focus on growth. So now I'm trying to go to my edge, being don't just go create something new. actually stay put and try to grow what you already have. And that stretch zone of not wanting to focus on growth, because growth can be hard and it can be frustrating. And part of me doesn't like focusing on growth because I don't like obsessing over what I don't have. I would rather say my platform is the perfect size. I have the perfect audience. I am earning exactly the right amount of money. It's all good, and just be super grateful and then organically allow whatever's going to come from that. So that's part of the reason I don't like growth as an aim in and of itself. I find it just very demotivating. Always chasing. It's never good enough. I don't like those vibes.
Yeah. Well, it's so important to know yourself too, what motivates you. But I also think there's so much power in doing something that you love that does have value, where we know that at some point there is value in the podcasting. There is value in what you're teaching for business owners. And like you said, maybe it'll just take time for the income to catch up with that change. But you've already shown in the past that it does. All right. So here's the point where I pause, because I say this in every podcast to everyone who's listening. It's wonderful to hear these stories and to gain this knowledge. But what really is going to make a difference in your career and what you're trying to accomplish is when you do something about what you've heard, to actually take some action. So, Jenny, what I'm going to do is I'm going to summarize, I think, 3 things that I've picked up from your story, and then you're welcome to add whatever you'd like to that. But I'm looking for specific actions that people can take. So the first one, the obvious one about Jenny Blake, and I know this about you for such a long time, you use the phrase eating up knowledge. And you read so many books. You said 1 book per week, sometimes 2. And I'm always in awe of your bookcase. If we saw that, of how many books you've read, in every conversation, you're like, I read this book. I'm like, how do you do that? But I think that's so important, right? Just making a commitment to consuming and eating up knowledge. And maybe 1 book a week isn't right for someone who's listening to this, but 1 book a month is. Making a plan to do that. I think that's really powerful. The other note that I have that I called out is at the beginning, when you talked about the treasure hunt and finding the story and learning how to ask deeper questions, getting to the heart of things. So when you're having a conversation with somebody at work or with your family, don't just ask surface questions. Be curious and ask more questions. And that's going to help deepen your understanding and even help them as well. And then the last, and this is a pattern throughout your life, Jenny, is that desire to be helpful and to create a pattern for someone else to follow, to simplify. And I think anyone listening to this, the next time you learn something, learn with the intent of helping someone else. When you come with the mindset of, I'm trying to help someone else with what I'm learning, like I'm doing right now, trying to help my kids, right? Your learning will be deeper. You will internalize what it is. And plus, you'll help others. And Jenny, you're such a fantastic example of that. Anything you'd add to that list, something that someone can do as a result of what they've heard today?
Thank you so much for this recap. What a gift. I would say, in the spirit of pivot, set up a few small experiments. If anything that Dave and I talked about today just sparked something for you, you have a little flicker of inspiration, set up a few experiments with no attachment to how they turn out or where they're going to lead you. That might mean taking a class, subscribing to a few podcasts on a topic that you're into, as Dave said, reading a few books, or conducting an interview series. You don't have to launch a podcast for all eternity. You could interview 10 people and release it as an album, for example. And it's just a one-off project with a fixed start and end. But do something small, do a couple experiments, and then those experiments will start to tell you what take on a momentum of their own. And in the spirit of free time, the inquiry to ask, well, I'll give you 2. One is what energizes me and what drains me. So be an observer in your own life. Look at what feeds you, what gives you energy, and also what drains you. And once you've observed for a few weeks, you'll be much clearer about what steps to take, how to double down on the good stuff, and how to do less of the draining stuff. And the other free time inquiry is, what steps can you take today to free your time far into the future?
Oh, those are wonderful takeaways. So yes. I've given you a few. Jenny's given you a few. As you heard that, odds are there's one that you latched onto in your brain. You said, I should do something about that. Do that thing. And if you do that thing, then a little bit of Jenny Blake is going to get carried with you. And also, please look up Jenny Blake's podcast, Free Time and Pivot. Subscribe to one or both of those, and you'll continue to get to learn from Jenny. Thank you so much, Jenny, for sharing generously of your time and your insight. It's been such a joy to talk with you.
Likewise. Thank you, Dave, for being such a great friend-tor and inspiration in my own life. This was such a delight. So thank you again for having me, and to everybody who's here listening.
You've been listening to the Dave Crenshaw Success Project, hosted by my dad, Dave Crenshaw, and produced by Invaluable Incorporated. Sound editing was done by my brother Stratton Crenshaw. Research and assistant production by Victoria Bedez. Voiceover by me, Darcy Crenshaw. And the music is by Ryan Brady via Pond 5 Licensing. Please subscribe to the Dave Crenshaw Success Project on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you like to get your podcasts. And please don't forget to leave us a 5-star review. See you next time.